Hello again, and welcome to the Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery unit. Let's get started by covering what we're working on and what our goals are. In plastic and reconstructive surgery, we are working with the integumentary system and its supportive tissues. The integumentary system is comprised of our skin, hair, and nails. For the purposes of this unit, we will be concerned mostly with the skin and the fat, muscle, ligaments, and bones directly beneath it. The primary goal in plastic and reconstructive surgery is to restore form and function. This goal applies to reconstruction of congenital defects, deformities and diseases, as well as treatment of wounds. A secondary goal in plastic and reconstructive surgery is to improve appearance. In this secondary goal, function is not restored or remodeled. Therefore, it is deemed aesthetic surgery. It's important to remember that aesthetic surgery often treats patients whose needs are in psychological or psychosocial realms, and we need to be careful not to assume why they are undergoing their elected procedures. You can always count on new medical terminology with every unit, and some key points to focus on here are the many varieties of grafts that exist. Over the past few months, we've discussed allografts, autografts, and xenografts, and it's important for you to remember that these grafts are all considered biological grafts. That is, grafts that were derived from living tissue. In plastic surgery, you will be exposed to biological grafts regularly, and particularly of the autograft variety. We need to add two very specific types of biological autografts to your knowledge bank, and they are the split thickness skin graft and the full thickness skin graft. A split thickness skin graft contains the epidermis and half of the dermis. The donor site will heal by reepithelialization. The sheet of harvested skin will then be used in an alternative site that is in need of skin tissue for reconstruction. A full thickness skin graft contains the epidermis, but it contains all of the dermis. Split thickness skin grafts usually are harvested from larger areas of the body like the thigh. Full thickness skin grafts can be harvested from different areas over the body, but they are more complex because the site from where the skin is harvested must be closed for healing to take place at the donor site. So we typically see full thickness skin grafts come from areas with natural creases with excess skin, like the groin or under the buttock, or sometimes even behind the ear. A couple other key terms for this unit include escharotomy, which is very important for emergency burn debridement procedures, and undermining. The art of plastic surgery often relies on the surgeon's ability to undermine tissues. They do this because they want to make the tissue mobile, but also maintain its vasculature and liveliness. In this technique, the skin is dissected from the fascial layer. In procedures of the face and neck particularly, this specific tissue plane is called the superficial musculo-aponeurotic system, or ESMAS for short. That's going to be really important in facelifts. As previously mentioned, we are dealing with the integumentary system for this unit. Know that the skin is composed of two layers, the epidermis and the dermis, and also that it is the largest organ of the body. The skin serves many purposes for our bodies. First and foremost, it protects the underlying tissues and organs from exposure. You may not think of your skin as the first line of defense against infection and disease, but it is. It also is responsible for excreting organic waste. It stores nutrients. It preserves fluid balance. It helps with thermoregulation by excreting water, which dissipates heat. Its sensory receptors transmit the sensation of touch, pressure, pain, and temperature. And it's also responsible for the synthesis of vitamin D. Whew, that's a lot. The outermost layer of skin is the epidermis. Depending on the location of the body you are dealing with, there will be either 4 or 5 layers of epidermis. As you can see on your slide, each layer begins with the term stratum. So let's address each one individually. The corneum layer is the most superficial layer. It is relatively transparent and is composed of dead keratinocytes that are filled with the protein keratin. It is this layer that sheds skin cells, which we are so conscious of not doing over our sterile fields. The next layer is lucidum, and it is dead or dying cells that are flat and densely packed and found mainly on the hands and feet. So if you're talking about skin anywhere but the hands or feet, you're talking about 4 layers of epidermis. If we're dealing with hands or feet, then you've got 5 layers. The next layer, as we progress nearer to the dermis, is the granulosum, which is responsible for producing keratin. Keratin is a protein specific to the integumentary system that helps protect the cells from damage or stress, which would otherwise kill the cell. The next layer is spinosum, and these cells basically don't know what they are because they are undifferentiated. But they will become specialized as they migrate to the surface of the epidermis. Finally, the deepest layer of the epidermis is the germinativum, and it is actually attached to the dermis and is responsible for the color of skin and hair we have. What is it about this layer that accomplishes this task, you ask? It's because this layer of skin contains melanocytes, which are the highly specialized cells that produce melanin. The innermost layer of the skin is the dermis. It is below that 4th or 5th layer of epidermis that contains connective tissue, nerves, and blood supply to the skin. It is also home to the skin's appendages like hair follicles and sebaceous and sweat glands. This layer of skin is the initiating layer that regulates our temperature because when we get hot, our sweat glands excrete moisture, which collects the epidermis, which is then exposed to air, which cools the moisture, and therefore us, down. This type of heat regulation is known as convection. Next, we'll discuss prepping and draping. When it comes to prepping and draping the surgical patient, it can get pretty creative to say the least. The first thing to consider is the type of prep solution that is appropriate, since we can be anywhere on the body and dealing with all types of skin conditions. Most of the time, surgeons will use DuraPrep or ChloraPrep solution on intact skin. On non-intact skin, the solution of choice is likely going to be betadine or Hibiclens. When they're prepping the face, they usually use something like betadine or Physahex. And remember why we don't use solutions with alcohol near the eyes, ears, or open wounds. It's also very important not to let any solutions pool in the eyes or ears, as this can cause corneal abrasions and deafness. When it comes to draping, the surgical technologist must take into account what parts of the body are incorporated in the procedure itself. These factors will dictate the method the team uses to position and drape the patient. Remember, we can be working anywhere from the tippy top of the head all the way down to the toes. So we could have turban drapes with body sheets, extremity drapes, U-drapes for the abdomen, lithotomy drapes when they're in lithotomy, and draping a plastics patient can be really challenging. So make sure you are thinking about what you know to be true about draping and how to build those layers so that you are sure to have a sterile field to work with. These next couple slides show you the 2-towel turban drape technique. Remember, doctors will have their own preferences, so be sure to use some sort of notebook or your SPRs to record how doctors you work with like things until you get them all down. In the end, the turban drape's goal is to exclude the microorganism-laden hairline from the operative field. Remember to protect yourself from the edges to prevent contamination and to avoid pinching the patient's forehead when applying the towel clip.